Let's look at what happened in round 28. We've talked about PSG's 3-1 win over Toulouse. Obviously, a very good weekend for Paris Saint-Germain. I want to start, though, with Akliouche's Monaco. 2-1 victors over Marseille, Tom, and I believe it's 7 wins in a row in the league now for Pocagnoli's team.
Yeah, Monaco absolutely flying in a way that would have seemed completely inconceivable during Pocagnoli's first few months at the helm. They had that series of 7 defeats in 8 games. And if you'd said at that point in the season that they would be absolutely flying up the standings and firmly in contention for automatic Champions League qualification, you would never have believed it. But he's managed to turn things around. He's got this new system, the 3-4-3, Denis Zakaria as the central centre-back, who's just brought a kind of serenity to that Monaco back line that there wasn't there before. Akliouche back in form. Alexander Golovin, such a funny player. He's also in form. Following Balogun, flying, scored, I think, probably the best goal he's ever scored to give Monaco victory. And, they look like they're on a really positive, really positive run of form. Should also highlight the contribution of Lukas Radecki, their goalkeeper, brought in from Bayer Leverkusen last summer, this vastly experienced Finnish international who hasn't played a huge amount this season because of injury, but he's back between the posts, and he played a really crucial role in this game last night because Marseille, didn't play all that badly, created a decent number of opportunities, but found Radecki in their way pretty much at every turn, and it was thanks to that the game was still goalless at half time, and then as we mentioned earlier, it was Golovin who pops up to put them ahead, and then Balogun scores this absolutely wonderful goal. Nightmare for Benjamin Pavard once again. I'm talking about Akliouche playing himself into France contention. Benjamin Pavard just plays himself further and further away from France contention every time he steps on the pitch, unfortunately for him. Marseille are 1-0 down. He makes a complete Horlicks of an attempted clearance on the halfway line, tries to use the outside of his right foot and succeeds only in sending the ball back towards his own goal. Balogun outpaces CJ Egan-Riley, Marseille's young English centre-back, who injures himself in trying to get back into position. He succeeds in forcing Balogun wide, but then Balogun produces the most beautiful little dainty right foot chip from the right-hand corner of the penalty area, sails over the head of Hieronymo Rulli and into the net. Marseille pull one back through Gouiri late on, but it was too late. Monaco right in the mix for Champions League qualification. And Marseille, that's now two successive defeats after the 2-1 defeat against Lille just ahead of the international break.
Andy, just to touch on Balogun, because it was a sensational goal. A mate this morning was asking me about following Balogun, and I said he's like a less good version of the Brazilian Ronaldo, which is obviously a really stupid thing to say because everybody is a less good version of the Brazilian Ronaldo. But he is this striker who's kind of very good at everything a number 9 needs to be good at. He's a strong runner, good with both feet, can score with his head, and that goal obviously is the sort of goal that Ronaldo might have scored. But it's 8 in 8 for Balogun, and it's great to see him injury free, isn't it? And firing Monaco perhaps into the Champions League, which, as Tom said, is something we couldn't have imagined 2 months ago. But they are now they're a point behind Lille, who are now third. They're level with Marseille, and Balogun's been brilliant.
Yeah, incredible. And I suppose what we don't know is to what extent is this all down to Pocagnoli, or to what extent is this about the undoubted quality of certain players in their team really shining through? Akliouche and Balogun are the 2 prime examples, but also Zakaria, 1 or 2 others as well, because they have got really good players. And Balogun is now in, I was going to say, the form of his life. I mean, perhaps when he was playing for Reims about 3 years ago, he was in a similar rich vein of form. He's now found that again at just the right time, scoring these goals that look like they're going to fire Monaco back into the Champions League, and doing it just in the run-up to the World Cup as well. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. I thought his goal last night was possibly the goal of the season in Ligue 1, just because of, obviously it came from a mistake but the poise and the ability to send that ball in that direction when you're kind of running away from goal, like, it'd be so easy to kind of slice it and, you know, go off balance and put it well wide as well as over the bar. And to put the ball in the net like that, I think is the kind of thing that, well, as you say, Ronaldo could have done it in the late 90s, but very few other strikers could do that. So really, really, really impressive.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about the Champions League battle. I was at the Decathlon Arena on Saturday night. Lille 3, Lens 0. Now, this was a huge occasion. The Lille fans were so up for this. There was, outside the stadium, there's a big sort of esplanade, and they've also got a lot of bars out there. So there's lots of beer flowing. Chips, obviously. Everybody eats chips in the north of France for some reason. That's the big speciality before football. There's no, what is it? I can't remember the Rennes special. Galette saucisse. There are no galette saucisse. It's all chips. But anyway, fireworks, firecrackers, brilliant atmosphere. And you know what? Lille just completely overpowered Lens. They were, from the word go, Lens could hardly get the ball off them. Bouadi and Bentaleb just fantastic in the midfield. Hakon Haraldsson popping up in space all the time. Fernandez Pardo, he was again preferred to Giroud as the central striker. Just absolutely terrific. And they were very good value, I would say, for the 3-0 victory. Lille's opening goal coming from Haraldsson after Pardo had gone on a great run up the left, just waited for Haraldsson to arrive, rolled it across the box. And then Lens came out in the second half and you're thinking, okay, this has to be a different Lens. And in the 4th minute, there's a ball, a sort of back pass from Mathieu Udol that Nidal Celik, the 19-year-old Bosnian centre-half, decides to just leave, thinking it's going towards his goalkeeper. Didn't realise Felix Carrera was running in behind him, and Carrera rounded the goalkeeper, made it 2-0. And that was game over, basically, for Lens. Fernandez Pardo scored a penalty. It could have been 4, it could have been 5. A real shame, I guess, in terms of the title race, because Lens are now 4 points behind PSG. They are, I don't think, going to win the title. PSG have got that game in hand, but they are still comfortably in second and heading for Champions League qualification. But Tom, were you surprised? I do want to give Lille a lot of credit because I think this win was all about Lille. But are you surprised that Lens just didn't have it in them to provide any sort of response? They did have Wesley Saïd back from injury, so it was their first choice front three. But for whatever reason, they just couldn't get into this game.
Yeah, it was surprising. I mean, the fact that they didn't have a single period of the game where you felt like they were in control. I mean, Lille just flew out of the traps. And as you say, fantastic atmosphere. This was always going to be the trickiest fixture for Lens prior to the PSG game, which, as we know, has now been pushed back until the middle of May. And you thought, well, if they can get through this, they might still be in a position to put PSG under pressure, and there might still be something riding on that game in terms of the title race when it comes around. But they just didn't show up, and I think you sensed the frustration afterwards. I mean, Pierre Sage said, I'm not going to look for positives. I don't want to sugarcoat this, that there is nothing positive to say. Lens had obviously beaten Lille 3-0 in the reverse fixture earlier in the season. But again, you look at that Lens starting 11, we've talked about this before, the injuries in defence are just catching up with them. Samson Beidou is still not fit. Jonathan Gahadi is not available. Ruben Aguiar, the right wing back, is not available either. And so you've got these young kids, and Nidal Celik, 19-year-old Bosnian youngster, he should not be playing this many matches. He should not be in the firing line. If he commits mistakes, and as you say, he was partly at fault for the crucial second Lille goal. You can't really blame him for that. Ismail Uganiyu alongside him has had a fantastic season. We've seen mistakes from him in recent weeks. I think back to the game against Strasbourg a few weeks ago. So it's perhaps not surprising that they are starting to creak a bit at the seams. It's unfortunate because we had been hoping that we were going to get a genuine title race. But as much as that no longer looks to be the case, rather, as you say, they've got a 10-point advantage in terms of automatic Champions League qualification. So if they can clear their heads, go again, Lens finish second, it's still the most incredible season. They're still in the Coupe de France. So a setback in terms of the title race, but still, plenty for their fans to be excited about.
Yeah, Nidal Celik, by the way, got 1 out of 10 from L'Équipe, which is almost as rare as a 10 out of 10. And I think it's really harsh on a young defender. That's not going to help his confidence. At the other end of the pitch, Nathan Ngoy, the young Belgian defender, he's just been capped by Belgium. Excellent again. Alongside him, Issa Mondi was terrific. The veteran Algerian, 34 years of age, absolutely superb. And Andy Scott, I understand you may have spotted Issa Mondi on the TGV. So my question for you is, did he have Odsonne Edouard in his pocket when you saw him?
I didn't see Odsonne Edouard, just his wife and his 3 children, and they got off the TGV and they got straight into a taxi in Angers station, so who knows where they were going, but
an interesting scoop.
Says an awful lot about me that I was, that's Issa Mondi. And the funny thing is that sometimes when you see this doesn't happen very often, but when you see a footballer or perhaps another personality sort of out with the context in which you would otherwise see them, so without his Lille top on and his name Mandy on the back, sometimes you might not actually necessarily recognise these guys, but it was unmistakably Issa Mondi. So there we go.
Brilliant stuff, Andy. And so you had that 0-0, didn't you? But maybe it's because you used all your goals up on Saturday, because you were commentating Brest 3, Rennes 4. Huge win for Rennes. And by the way, we've got, so what is it, 5 teams separated by 3 points. You've got Lille on 50, they're third. Marseille and Monaco, 4th and 5th on 49 points. Lyon, 48 points. And in 7th, you've got Rennes on 47. So a really, really important win for Francais's team. Yeah, and,
they are by no means out of the running for Champions League qualification, which for a club with their means and their ambitions is probably what they should be going for. But, a while ago they would have easily said, well, if we get the Europa League, that's fantastic. It's kind of what I was saying before about Balogun and Monaco. It's all about timing in a way, and Monaco's run is incredible. 8 wins and 2 draws in their last 10. Lille have won 3 on the bounce. They're unbeaten in 8. And in the case of Rennes, it is, I think I'm right in saying, 5 wins and a draw in 7 now since Habib Bey left. If you include the win against PSG under the interim coach Sébastien Tambouret, Francaise then came in and they've kept that run going. They had a couple of disappointing results at home in the last couple of games before the international break, taking 1 point from 2 matches. But they got back to winning ways in Brest. It was a really fun game. And the highlight, I suppose, in a way, maybe not the highlight because it was just a humdinger of a match, but the fact that Esteban Lepol scored 2 penalties and is now on course to be in a very good position to go on and be the top scorer in Ligue 1 this season, because one of his main rivals, Joaquin Panicelli at Strasbourg, is now out for the rest of the season. So it's probably going to be between Lepol and Mason Greenwood. And interestingly, Lepol, he had a penalty saved against Nice about a month ago. He scored 2 penalties at the weekend. He'd never scored a penalty before in Ligue 1. So he's done it now. That was kind of one of the things that was so impressive about his goal-scoring record, was that none of his goals were penalties. But he scored 2 at the weekend, tucked them away very confidently, and he just looks like a terrific player. And when you've got him and the likes of Ludovic Blas and all the other creative players in that Rennes team performing well, Moussa Al Tamari, who's another one to look out for in the context of the World Cup, the Jordanian, and they're really, really motoring, and they're really looking like a team who can. But then again, there's so much competition for Champions League places. They may not qualify for the Champions League, but they're very much on course for Europe of some form or another. And after a couple of years away from Europe, that's great for them.
Yeah, but they could do. They could get in the Champions League, because it is wide open between those 5 clubs. A disappointing 0-0 draw for Lyon at Angers. Andy, just to check, is that 8 games or 9 without a win now for Lyon? They had those 13 straight wins, 9 without a win in all competitions.
So Lyon had 13 straight wins. It's now 9 games in all competitions without a win. It's 6 games in the league in which they've taken 3 points from 3 draws, and they've had 3 defeats in that time. And they've kind of stopped scoring goals. There's not much to say about the Lyon game, but actually there are some things to say about it. They were just not on it at all. They never looked like losing, but goodness me, when you've got guys like Tolisso got substituted in the second half, so maybe a bit of a physical issue with him. Endrick was terrible. Endrick did nothing to look remotely interested in. I said this a couple of weeks ago, and I think maybe you were a bit surprised, but he's not done much, Endrick. I was quite surprised he made the Brazil squad. He scored 3 goals since coming to Ligue 1, and all of them were in the same game against Metz, the worst team in the division. He did absolutely nothing yesterday. Pavel Schultz came off having looked like he was struggling too, so they have just completely gone off the boil, and they've got to play PSG in a couple of weeks. They've got to play Lens at home on the last weekend. I think they've got to play Rennes. I think at the moment that Lyon are not going to be getting into the Champions League, and they may even struggle to get top 6. That's the reality.
Yeah, interesting, because the momentum is with Lille, it's with Monaco now. The other 3 games we haven't mentioned, it's pretty much as you were at the bottom, if you like. We had Metz 0, Nantes 0. Not a good result, obviously, for either of those 2 teams, and Nantes were under the cosh. Vahid Halilhodzic says we're alive still, but only just. Le Havre 1, Auxerre 1, Lorient 1, Paris FC 1. So just very quickly, Tom, as far as the relegation battle's concerned, Metz bottom on 15, Nantes second bottom on 18. Auxerre look like they are going to finish in the playoff position. They're 16th on 23 points. Can they catch Nice, Tom? Nice are 4 points above Auxerre. They were badly beaten 3-1 at Strasbourg, and they look to be struggling and, losing. Well, they are losing games once again.
Yeah, Nice are going in the wrong direction. I mean, Auxerre aren't exactly flying, but a useful point at Le Havre yesterday. Lassine Sinioko back amongst the goals and looked pretty lively. They've got a big game coming up at the weekend at home to Nantes. And I think for Nantes in particular, that feels a bit like a must-win because their fixtures beyond that trip to Auxerre look pretty tricky. I think Metz unfortunately look condemned. And I mean, they were unfortunate. Gauthier Hein thought he'd scored twice. Only for both goals to be ruled out for offside. I think if Nantes don't win at Auxerre at the weekend, particularly if they lose, I think that's probably them down as well. And if Auxerre do get a positive result and are able to close the gap between them and Nice, then Nice will start sweating even more profusely than they are already.
Oh dear. Thank you very much, Tom. It's been great to hear your thoughts this morning. Thank you, Andy, as well. Andy, you're off to Mainz, is that right? Because I haven't mentioned Strasbourg playing Mainz on Thursday night. So a huge week, obviously, for PSG, but this is also huge for Strasbourg, isn't it? First quarterfinal in how long?
Yeah. Quarter of a century. Easily. It's since 1982. I believe it's since 1982 or 1981. Nice. Something like that. A long time. Since before I was born.
It's a bit of a derby, isn't it? Mainz just across the border in Germany. It should be good. Listen, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in once again this morning. It's been a real pleasure. One final call for you, please, to spread the word about the French Football Show, to like, subscribe on Spotify, Apple, any other platform. In particular, get involved on YouTube. The podcast gets published every week in its different parts, but also lots of other content. So check out the French Football Show on YouTube, and we look forward seeing you again next week. Take care. Bye bye, everyone.